Hi. When you get into a car for the first time, or a car that you haven't driven for a long time, there are certain things that you do automatically. The adjustment of the seat, the adjustment of the wheel, you look in the mirrors, make sure that they suit your needs. What we're going to talk about today is adjusting your workstation the same way. My name's Jim Gallagher. I'm a field services specialist in the Boston Regional Office. Joining us today is Paul Davis, who's an ergonomics engineer for Biomechanics Corporation of America, and they're out of Melville, New York. And while Biomechanics is out of Melville, you're out of Wichita.
Correct.
Wichita, Kansas. Thank you very much for joining us. Ergonomics engineers. Ergonomics, what's it about? What does it mean?
Ergonomics, you did a good example of bringing in the car example. What we're trying to do there, if we look at that as in the workplace, the workstation here is the car. The task is driving the car. When we get into the car, we adjust ourselves to be able to accomplish that task. And that's really what we were doing in that example. When you get in, you adjust your seat forward or backward. If you didn't do that, if you were just to hop into any car, go out to the street and hop into whatever car is out there, sometimes you may not get in, sometimes you might get in, but you'll be cramped. Sometimes you'll get in, you won't be able to reach any of the controls. You can't properly do that task. What we really like to do is have you fit yourself to the task.
For you folks watching, you were given a handout to supplement this video, and there were a few pages in there. The handout that is titled Ergonomics, Fitting the Workstation to the User, as Paul had said. In the first page of the, or actually the second page of the handout, it talks about occupational risk factors for CTD. What's CTD?
CTDs are cumulative trauma disorders. The reason we call them cumulative trauma disorders is because you can't associate them to one act. Say you go out and fall down and cut your hand. Well, this is something you can associate with that one act that happened. We like to break it out. A CTD is something that happens over a period of time. Golfer's elbow, tennis elbow, bricklayer's shoulder, some different things. The reason they're associated with either sporting events or occupations is because we don't know what causes them. We just see these people having those disorders. What they consist of is awkward postures, excessive force, high repetition and frequency, and task duration or inadequate rest.
And we have the same kind of thinking for people who occupationally work like in a social security office, doing the same repetitive type tasks?
Right. If you do something repetitively and we see these things happening or the same injuries occurring in people that do the same type of task, it would probably be associated with that type of task. Carpal tunnel syndrome, which is one of the big CTDs that's getting a lot of press right now, everybody's now relating everything to that. We see that in tasks that are repetitive. High forces, we don't see that a lot in the workplace. Typing, writing. There are some cases where you might type on the typewriter with high force, and we like to have you loose.
Hopefully we get rid of all of those typewriters, so it's not that much of a force anyway.
On keyboards, typewriters, you used to use a lot of force, but you brought that over to the computer environment where you don't have to hit the keys as hard.
Maybe handling some of these like real large disability folders and things like that.
Some of the folders that you have.
Folder shipment time.
Right.
Yeah, we all know about that.
Now we get into some high force, but we don't do that a lot of the time. But really what we're looking at in the office environment is repetition. Repetition or frequency is another term used. Rest, the amount of rest that you get, and posture are the three big ones. I like to look at frequency and rest together. You really need to look at those together.
Not as if rest is something that we frequently do at work.
Right. And when I talk about rest, I'm not talking about resting as far as laying down, taking a nap, or taking a coffee break.
And that's what I was talking about.
Yeah,
you can't be doing that at work all the time.
Right. What I'm talking about.
Don't get caught.
There you go. What I'm talking about there is say you sit down and you type for let's say an hour. You're using your hands.
Right.
So when I say rest, to do something that you're not using your hands. In the Social Security office, the different types of tasks that we say, we don't see you doing a lot of repetitive tasks for an extended period of time. You're up, you're moving around, you're going talking to people, you're getting a claimant to talk to them, so you're up moving around quite a bit. So really those aren't big factors. The big factors that we can focus on, or the big factor, is posture.
Okay. Let's talk, the next page in your handout there talks about adjusting your workstation. The ideal workstation. Not all of our workstations are modular furniture. Many of them are still conventional. Who's responsible for adjusting that equipment?
Ultimately, it comes down to the person using the equipment, or the user, the operator. We'd like to have that person, if they're comfortable with the ability to go in, move some things around. They've got to be empowered to do that themselves. What we really try to shoot for, this is the ideal posture that we like to see. We know we can't achieve that all the time, but let's go over how we would like to sit if we could in front of a computer. The first thing we like to achieve is to get a 90-degree angle at the elbow. Now to do this, we raise the chair up usually, if the workstation, if the surface is not adjustable. And what we like to have is a 90-degree angle with the fingertips touching the home row of the keyboard. Okay? After we've achieved that, then we look at the leg posture and the hip posture. Here again, we like to have a 90-degree angle at the hip and at the knee. To do that, we might have to provide something up underneath the feet, a footrest or something to get the feet up a little bit higher. After we've got those two postures, then we go into the positioning of the neck. We like to have the neck in a natural relaxed posture. We don't like to have you looking down
you don't want to
or
tilt
up
forward or up.
or to the side. So we usually have to raise the monitor up. A lot of times we see the monitor's too low, so we raise the monitor up to get it right about eye level. If you were to look straight ahead, it should be right in front of you.
Paul, the differences about modular furniture and conventional furniture, obvious differences, but when we're talking about adjusting them ergonomically, there are certain ways that we can handle both of them.
Right. What we're trying to do is get into a good working posture. The first thing we look at is we like to get the height adjusted so that they're at a good, in a good relationship with the keyboard or writing work surface. So we usually use the height adjustment, and that's found on the left side of the chair, most commonly on the chairs that are around the Social Security offices. So we use that adjustment. To get it to go down, you just sit in the chair, pull up on the lever, and the chair goes down. To get it to come up, you have to pull up on the lever and you get your weight off of the chair to bring it
And
up
it'll
or down.
come up
Right.
hydraulically.
Right.
I didn't think I was going to be able to say that.
You got it out. The next adjustment that we like to make is the seat back adjustment. Everybody's curvature in their back is different. Some people's curve is the small of their back is what we're talking about when, mainly with the chair back. We either raise the chair up or down, and there's an adjustment on the back of the seat back that you pull up on, and that allows it to go up and down, and you push down on the lever.
You can almost tell, if you
locks
walk around an office, you can tell people that just took the chair out of the box and set it up, the back of the chair is sitting right on the seat,
Right.
and there was never an attempt made to adjust it.
Right.
So you want to bring that up in about belt level?
Yeah. We say the small of the back, but everybody's small of the back is different, and really it's where your belt line is. That's another landmark that we like to use, your belt line. And we want it to support your back. Now there's another adjustment there on the right side. There's a lever that allows your seat back to move forward and backward. The way that's used is you have to look at how you do your work. Some people like to type leaning forward or leaning back. It's really up to you. We always like to keep
the people
the back
that are always seem to be forward in the seat and leaning over, they're not getting that back support,
No.
right?
No, they're not.
Is there anything they can do?
And that's what the adjustment's for. You pull
Okay.
up on that adjustment, and that brings the seat back up to your back again. Okay, but say you're doing that for a while, but now you want to lean back. And it's good to have a change in posture. We don't like you sitting in one posture all day long. So that's good for you to pull that back, lean back, and then get into a posture. Say if you're talking to somebody, you're going to be dialoguing with them for a while. Then you want to pull that back, lean back, and relax.
Maybe the best advice we give someone about their chair is to feel free to experiment with it.
Right.
See what feels best.
A good example of that, we like to see people move around. If you stay in one posture all day long, we're going to see problems. You get sore, you get stiff.
Sure.
A good example of that, and I like this analogy, is if we were to go out and buy $1 million chair from NASA that fits you perfectly,
Yeah.
or we would allow you to have a rock. And the only difference is if you're in this chair from NASA is you can't move. Can't
Okay.
move at all. But on a rock, you're allowed to get up and move around. Which one would you rather have?
Well, is this a trick question? Is this going to end up, I'm going to be some kind of space shot or something?
Right.
I guess what? The
Your
rock?
rock. You're the rock, because you can get up and move around. If you start getting uncomfortable, you can change
You
your
can adjust.
posture, and you can move around, and you can
So
adjust
no
yourself.
different with a chair.
Right, but with the NASA chair, even though we've got you in a good, or quote, a good posture, you have to just stay stagnant. And you don't like to just stay in one position.
No.
Okay, you want to move around, and that's good because it gets your circulation flowing, gets nutrients throughout your body moving.
Okay. The monitor. There's a lot of considerations with the monitor.
Right. Like we were talking about before, ideally we like to get it right at eye height. Okay. There are a lot of ways to do that. You can use reams of copy paper to get it up in the air. Really anything just to get that monitor up. Some of the problems that we see with that, though, is if the monitor's been down for a long time and you've always looked down like this becomes your comfortable posture.
Yeah.
Okay, so to
Is
say
it comfortable or just what you're used to?
what you're used to,
Yeah.
and it becomes comfortable because that's what you're used to. And you know, when I'm using my computer, I'm always down like this.
Yeah.
It may cause you problems, but it is what you're used to. So if you were to come up and raise it up right to eye level, then what we see is people say, well, that's real uncomfortable. It's more comfortable for me to be down here. Well, it's not really in the long term. It's just because that's what you're used to. So
Okay.
sometimes you need to bring that up gradually if it's very uncomfortable and annoying to have it up high to begin with. There are some other factors you have to consider with that as well. Lighting is another thing. If you have windows.
What do you mean?
Okay, we're talking about glare is really what
Okay.
we're looking at. But we need to know what glare is. If we look at a monitor, it's a light source. And our eyes need to open up to see the light source. Now, like a document doesn't have a light source. It's not a direct light source. So you need a light to bounce off of that to come into your eyes so you can see the light. But with a monitor, you don't need that. So there are two types of glare. There's glare coming from lights from above or from windows that hit the monitor and then shine back into your eyes, causing your eyes to close up, and you can't see the monitor anymore, or not as well. There's another light, which is direct lighting that comes right into your eyes. Here again, windows, lights from above. But that also has your eyes closed down as well, and you can't see the monitor as well. So what we like to do is position that monitor so you're not getting those types of glares.
All right. Now, obviously, as you pointed out, you don't always have the luxury of saying, do I have windows or not, or am I directly under the light or
Right.
not? So when we're talking about interference of light sources, are these anti-glare screens, are they all they're hyped up to be?
They are and they're not.
Good
it
answer.
really, yeah, it really depends on how you're using them and if they work for you. Some of the problems you come in with glare screens, they do their job. They reduce that amount of light that shines back into your eyes, but they're also cutting down the monitor light, so you can't see them as well. Sometimes they blur the monitor, so you can't see the monitor well, or it looks fuzzy. Some people that bothers them, other people it doesn't. So in some cases they work, some ways they don't.
There are some ways that maybe we can tilt the monitor or something like
Right.
that to cut down some of that glare, and we don't have to compromise the light that emits from the PC?
Right. The glare screen is really a second alternative. The first alternative is try to get rid of the light sources themselves. Say for Windows, for an example. There are many ways to handle window glare. First, you want to get the computer away from that, but if you can't, you can put shades in front of the window, close the shades when it's real bright outside, that type of thing. Or you can just move the monitor. Say there's a window there, move it away so you're not getting the glare.
One of the things that that we have to be concerned about is that we're not always in a position where we can say where we want the monitor, where
Right.
the monitor is best suited. We're into shared arrangements.
Right.
We're into to working where we have no choice about where the
Lighting.
indirect lighting is from.
Right.
What are some of the things that you can do with a shared monitor?
What you're really trying to do there is find out who uses the monitor, who uses it the most. If you have somebody that uses a monitor for like 7 hours a day as opposed to somebody that uses it just 1 hour a day, well, you want to adjust it to fit the person that uses it most of the time. Or if you're using it equally, you try to get it in between the two. Say you have a taller individual and a shorter individual. You'd want to get it kind of in the middle and get it to where both people are comfortable. Maybe one has to look up a little bit, one has to look down a little bit, but yet they're minimizing the amount of movement.
Some of the other considerations on eye strain. What can be done to combat that eye strain?
Eye strain is caused a lot by the tasks that you're doing. The eyes are no different than any other muscle in your body. If you were to use one muscle a whole lot, say your arm, repetitively, your arm gets sore. But if you use it repetitively a lot, then it starts to get sore from overuse. So what you want to do is have a happy medium between the two. When you're using a computer a lot, if you're looking right at the screen, you're focusing at one length. Your eyes may start to bother you. If that happens, then look up, look off to the distance, focus at a different distance to get those eye muscles moving again.
Any special things you can do for someone that wears bifocals?
Okay, bifocals is a different situation. Here we don't want the monitor up to eye level. The reason we want it at eye level is because the natural gaze of a person, if you were to sit comfortably, the head naturally tilts forward about 15 degrees. Just, you aren't usually straight. It tips forward
Right.
just about 15 degrees. Your eyes can move comfortably without strain up 15 degrees and down 15 degrees. So really from straight out in front of you, if you look straight ahead, down 30 degrees total, is where we like to have the monitor. Now with bifocals, you don't have that ability because you have to look through one point of your glasses down at the bottom. What we like to have you do there is lower the monitor so you keep your neck in a nice posture, but yet you're still looking right into the screen.
You were talking, when we were talking about feet, is that you were saying that ideally that you don't want to have a footrest.
Right. What we really like to see is you using the floor, having your feet on the floor. The reason that is if you're moving around in your office from one work surface to another, so you have two work surfaces. If you have one footrest and you're using that, when you move over to the other work surface, you don't have anything anymore. So that's why we like to have the floor down there, because your feet are always flat on the floor.
There are situations, though, when a footrest would be helpful?
Right. When you have to bring the chair up to be high enough on the work surface, to get up above the work surface. If you're a shorter individual, usually your feet are hanging off the front of the chair. That's when we really need a footrest. Now, how high does a footrest need to be? That'll be the next question. Really, it just depends on your leg position.
Yeah.
What we like to do, the reason we have you on a footrest and we have you bring your feet up or bring your legs up is to get that 90-degree angle in the leg again, at the knee. The reason we have that is because all your blood supply to your lower leg goes to the back of your leg. And if your leg is compressed back there, decreases that blood flow. And then this could cause aching and swelling of the ankles, that type of thing, which you'll notice at night. You don't usually see it during the day, but you notice at night.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's talk about the wrists and the proper wrist position and the wrist supports.
Okay.
There's a little test that you can do that'll show you whether or not we have the right wrist position. This is Susan Arsenault. Susan is a claims representative in the Boston district office, and Susan has gratefully, whatever it is, volunteered to come up and be your assistant.
Okay. Let's go back to before when we were talking about occupational risk factors for CTDs. What we were talking about there was a combination of posture and force. What this really does is show the interrelationship of the two. What this device does is it takes and changes the muscle activity into an audible sound.
Now, what are these things that you're sticking on her now?
These are electrodes to conduct the electrical activity in the muscles into the device.
Susan, did you sign the medical release form before you... Oh, you did, all right.
They don't get worried about this until I plug it into the wall socket.
Okay. Do not attempt this at home. He is a trained professional.
All right.
Now, what's the idea here?
Okay. What this is her muscle activity. As you can tell, that's kind of a normal activity. Go ahead and act like you were typing. Take that down a little bit. Okay. As you can see, as she's typing and moving her fingers, her muscle activity increases. Now go ahead and bend your wrist backward and keep typing. Now you see how much harder her muscle is working? With that increased muscle activity, you're using more energy. When you use more energy, you get tired. Okay. At the end of the day, if you can tell the difference from doing this, if everybody does this as opposed to this, there's not a whole lot of difference, but your muscles are working a lot harder.
So now, how does it sound when you have your wrist properly?
Okay, if you're at a normal...
So that's the proper 90-degree angle, and that's incorrect?
That's incorrect. That's what we call extension. If you look at flexion, also, if you're up too high, say you're above the keyboard too high, you get a little bit more, okay? But what we see really a lot of people typing is when they type, we like to have the wrist straight or in a neutral posture. Straight this way and then straight in this manner as well. And what we see is a lot of people type like this, okay? Now, this kind of feeds us right into wrist rest. Thank you, Susan.
Okay, thank you. Nicely done.
Thank you.
So when we're talking about the wrist rests, so what we're saying is that the wrist rests are not really something that you should use while you're typing?
Right. What we see with the wrist, if we look at wrist position again, we like to keep that straight wrist if we look from the side. Now wrist rest, the way they should be used is as a rest, okay? When you're typing, you should get them up off of the wrist rest, and then when the computer's processing data or you're looking for more data off of the document that you're typing from, then you can rest your wrist, okay? If you don't have a wrist rest, you usually rest your wrist on a desk, which is hard, maybe even a sharp edge. So what we're trying to do is put it on something soft, a cushion there. Plus, if you look at how you rest, if you don't have a wrist rest, you get your hands into this posture. Even though you're resting, you're still in an awkward posture. That wrist rest will keep your wrist straight.
And then when you're looking at the document, regardless of if the document's down on the desk or if the document's up higher, your wrist is going to kind of follow that motion then.
Right, right. And we like to keep this straight posture. Now there are two ways that the wrist rests are useful. We don't like to have you resting your wrist when you type because you put more pressure on the wrist in the carpal tunnel, thus the carpal tunnel syndrome. We don't like to see that pressure. However, if you do type with your wrist rest, and some people do, they rest their wrist while they type in this posture, if you have a wrist rest, that'll bring you up to this posture. And even though you're resting your wrist, it's not as good, which you shouldn't be, which is, it's better than resting and doing this. Okay, so it does help you in some cases.
The documents, as we had said, the documents, that'll control your eyes, and really your wrist will follow your eyes and things like that. So where, if you're typing from a document, where should the document be? Is there an always rule here?
Yeah, the place that it should be placed, we're really looking at the eyes again, and this goes back to eye strain. We like to have the document the same distance away from the eyes as the monitor, because now you're switching between two monitors. Okay, you're switching to two different things, and if your eye has to refocus between those lengths, your eye will get tired. And we also like to have it the same height as the monitor. If it's down on your desk, which is a lot of places where it is, you have to, one, twist your neck and then look down as well. Okay, so we like to have it right next to the monitor so you don't have to twist.
There are a variety of document holders.
Right. There
some
are
that sit on the desk, some that are attached to the monitors.
Right. And you want to try to get it up. You want to get it up as close to the monitor as you can, because we don't like to see you either twist your neck or to look up or down.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's talk about just a few more points. When you were talking about adjusting a conventional workstation so that it's more comfortable for you, we don't necessarily need to run out and be buying things that go under the monitor that add 2 or 4 inches to them, or run out and buy footrests, or run out and spend a lot of money on things that we might not need.
Right.
There are some things that you had mentioned, for example, the reams of paper to adjust the monitor height.
Right.
A loose leaf binder on the floor to see whether or not you need a footrest. Right.
If we were talking about footrest, we talked about a temporary type solution for the monitor stand using reams of paper. You can do the same type of thing with a footrest. The SSA has a lot of old black binders that they used to do. We're trying to go to a paperless society, trying to get away from all the hard copy papers. Take one of those black binders and put a ream of paper in there and use that as a footrest. There are different ways to do that to see if that posture helps. Some people, that's not going to help. I'm going to get them into, say I go through and I get them into one of these postures I say is ideal. Well, that could be very uncomfortable for some people. And if that's the case, then we want to get them out of a position where they're uncomfortable.
So what we can do is we can use the paper under the monitor, or we can use the paper that's inside the binder, wrap it around with a rubber band, and use it as a footrest. Try it for a while and see if that works for you, and then if you find that it does help you do your job, if you are more comfortable when you're doing your job, we'll go out and we'll make the procurement. Your comfort in your workstation is very important, and at the same time we have to balance that with the fact that we're not going to run out and buy all of this equipment that's not going to be used. So let's try some of the other things in a conventional system, and if that works, then we'll go out and we'll make the expenditure to make sure that your workstation suits you.
And I might make one point on that as well. The changes that we're talking about isn't something that you're going to feel right away. Sometimes you'll feel it at the end of a day working. It's not something you'll automatically feel. It may take a day, a week, or a month to feel the difference. However, if you make some changes and it causes you more discomfort than the way you were before, then you might want to look into that as well, because not all these changes are going to affect everybody's different. These are the changes that we see affecting most of the people in a positive manner. So, but there will be some cases where, you know, if you're in a certain posture, it's going to be very uncomfortable and cause you a lot of discomfort. So if you fall into that category, then you need to
try
address
something
that.
else.
Right.
Like the guy that goes to the doctor and says, "The doctor, it hurts when I do that." He says, "Don't do that."
Right.
Yeah. The idea of the wrist brace, the elbow brace, things like that, you don't really recommend them.
No, really you need to get that advice from a medical provider to find out how you should use those. The reason I don't like to recommend them myself is, if we go back to our occupational risk factors again, we've got force, frequency, and posture. Well, if we look at the force and posture modes, what those are doing is trying to keep you in that neutral posture that we talked about. Now, if you put one of those on and your task requires you to get into that awkward posture, now you've increased the amount of force you have to apply to get there. So now you've increased another factor, plus you haven't eliminated anything. So
one of the other factors, in addition to force, is the frequency. When we're talking about how the wrist is affected and the use of the wrist during your normal workday and things like that, we need to add in that there are obviously other factors that affect the strain and the fatigue on the wrist. Folks who knit a lot, folks who bowl, video games.
Right, and gardening is another one. What we're really looking at here, again, if we go back to the occupational risk factors, is force, frequency, posture, rest, that type of thing. And that applies to away from work as well. We don't like to tell people not to do those things that they do away from work, because if you don't have hobbies and you don't enjoy yourself away from work, why go to work?
Why go to work,
okay?
right.
But what we're talking about here is maybe not doing those activities. Say you have a hard day at work, you do a lot of computer work at work on one certain day. We know that our work cycles go in cycles. It's not all work related, and you have to see what you're doing at home. Bowling is another example. There you have high force and very awkward postures when you start putting twist on the ball.
Now, we've talked a lot about workstations, we've talked computer equipment, monitors, keyboards, and everything like that. All of these kind of state-of-the-art kind of machines, but still, someone that's working out in the Social Security office does a lot of writing, the disability interviews, the medical forms, the 3368s. There's a lot of writing that still goes on in spite of all of this equipment that's available. Now, you have some tips there that will help the person who writes a lot as well, right?
Right. If you're to get a pen that's a little bit larger in diameter, if you get a larger pen, then you get a better mechanical advantage on the pen or pencil, whatever you might be using. Another thing that you can do is just lighten up on your grip. A lot of people you'll find if you start getting in a stressful situation, and in some types,
And boy, we know we have those in the
Right.
Social Security offices.
Right. You'll start gripping your pen real tight. What you need to do is lighten up on that grip, because here you're using high force when you don't need to. You don't have to grip your pen tight. Maybe loosen up on that force and relax a little bit more while you're
Now,
working.
we saw that when we were kids in school, and the teacher would walk up and down the aisle and try to pull the pen out of your hand.
Right.
And if they couldn't, you got whacked with a ruler. So, so that's
teach
the
you
same
not to-
thing.
right,
We
right.
teach them young. This idea about a shared workstation, the front-end interviewing, the working as receptionist, having to go back up and forth to a variety of different workstations, there are still adjustments that can be done each time you go.
Right. Really what we like to do is for everybody to adjust it to their own needs. But you have to really look at your exposure time, how long you're there. If somebody's using a workstation more throughout the day, a lot of these changes that we're talking about, raising a monitor on copy paper, that type of thing, takes a long time to do. Takes some effort to get that job done. So what we try to do is minimize our risk for each person. Look who's using it the most, and try to balance it to fit their needs more than the other person, or reduce the amount of bad or awkward postures that we
And
see.
don't be afraid when you get into the workstation to, just as when you get into a car, adjust it so it meets our
Right.
needs.
Right.
Okay, we've talked about the equipment, we've talked about the individual things that we can do in the workstations. It's time for a quiz, all right? All of you, if you have a look at the last page in your handout, there's a couple of workstations there with the from and the to.
Right.
And what are we looking for here? Are we looking for befores and afters?
Right. Really, if you look at the before, the from, we're trying to go from that workstation to the new workstation. And what we like to do is try to point out what the changes are there. And if you look at that, you probably see some remarkable changes in just her posture.
Right.
Well, how did we achieve that? Well, we've raised the monitor, we've raised her chair up to get her knees in good posture. but
Well,
when we
she's
did
got a
that-
different chair, too. The one on the bottom has
Got an updated
5
chair.
legs on it, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
those chairs are available.
Right. We've raised the chair up to get her arms in a nice posture, like we talked about before, the neutral posture, 90 degrees at the elbow. But when we did that, her feet started to hang off the chair. So we've provided a footrest there to get her feet planted on the floor again. Okay. After we've done that, you see her looking down, so we've raised the monitor up and provided a document holder, because she does a lot of transcribing.
Okay. The other thing there, I'm trying to look at the befores and afters. This is like the cartoons there. You have to, what's different from
Right.
this? The coffee cup's gone.
That's one that a lot of people notice. We haven't taken the coffee cup away. We don't ever want to do that to you. So it's just put on the other side of the monitor, and you just can't see it in
So
the
if you
picture.
hold the picture the other way, you can see
You
it
can
on
see
the
the
other side
coffee
of
cup.
it.
Right,
All right.
right.
Very good. You know, well, thank you very much for pointing that out. I hope you got them all right. Paul, why are we doing all of this? Why are we doing it? We're not going to always have someone on site to be able to do
Right.
all of these things. So who's responsible?
Really, the employees are the people that are using the workstation as the people that drive their cars. It's their responsibility to move the seat, to adjust the workstation to fit them. And it's really, we're trying to empower you to go out, and the reason we're doing the video is to tell you how. We can't just say you're empowered to go do it and not tell you what you should be doing. So we're giving you this information so you can go out and make some changes in a positive manner to make your workstation a more helpful environment.
So you're in charge of your own workstation. You're the one who knows what's comfortable for you and what suits you best. We're talking about not only ergonomics, we're talking about empowerment. It's up to you to make sure that your workstation suits your needs. As we can provide additional equipment or suggestions to help you, we will certainly do that. But it's important that just as you get into your car and you make those adjustments, that you step into your workstation and you make those adjustments so that they're helpful and they're comfortable for you. This is Jim Gallagher for Paul Davis, Susan Arsenault. Thank you very much, and thank you for tuning in. Good day.